We're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Travis Bishop and James Branum. In 2009, Travis Bishop received a 12-month sentence in a court-martial at Fort Hood for refusing to deploy to Afghanistan for reasons of conscience. He was sent to the Northwest Joint Regional Correctional Facility at Fort Lewis to do his time, and he was recognized by Amnesty International as a prisoner of conscience. He was released this last Thursday. James Branum represents Travis Bishop and is the legal advisor to the GI Rights Hotline of Oklahoma and co-chair of the Military Law Task Force of the National Lawyers Guild. Travis, let's start out with you. Tell us, when and why did you join the U.S. military?
I joined in 2004. I'd always thought about the military. You know, we came from a patriotic family. And it was always in the back of my mind. I had a really high ASVAB score, you know, so even the Coast Guard sent me letters when I was at home in the mail. So I had a good job. The job went away. So I was like, well, all right, you know, now's probably time. It wasn't like an act of patriotism after, you know, 9/11 exactly. Like that still helped factor into it, but it was more just, you know, I've thought about this for a really long time, and now the opportunity presented itself. The day I got the day I lost that job, I went to the recruiter's office. And so, yeah.
All right. And you served in Iraq. When exactly did you start to have second thoughts about your service?
I would say during Iraq, just seeing things that go on there like every day. Like I didn't see combat, you know, I'm a signal soldier, but just like, I don't know, I didn't, really scatterbrained this morning.
Well, one of the things he shared with me was that when he was over there, he just started asking, you know, why are we here? What are we doing in this ride? And you shared with me a little bit. Why don't you share a little bit kind of about your faith journey a little bit? Like what happened to you over there?
Yeah, well, it's, I didn't really have a, it wasn't the biggest conflict being in Iraq. My biggest personal conflict being in Iraq. I wasn't forced to do things, you know, that I didn't want to do. But, you know, you hear the stories on the news, and that's true. You just wonder, why are we here? What are we really doing here? But didn't really factor in too much until finding out about going to Afghanistan, because Iraq was, I don't want to say, it wasn't as difficult for me as it was for a lot of others. So I can't really say too much about my Iraq experience.
All right. So where were you when you heard that you were going to be deployed to Afghanistan? Were you still serving in Iraq, or had you come home?
No, I had already come back. I was on Fort Hood, and in February, we got told that we were going to Afghanistan. And actually, originally, in February, we were told in March that we were going to Afghanistan. Yeah. And, you know, I was an E5, I was a section sergeant, so, like, immediately, okay, gotta get my guys ready. So, we started doing training, we did field problems, checking equipment. And, you know, I knew what Iraq was. I'd already been there, you know what I mean? And I had my misgivings about going back, but honestly, you know, at that point in my life, I think that if they had told me Iraq again, you know, I probably would have gone. But Afghanistan, hearing all the stories about that, I decided, you know, I need to get right with my Creator, because even a signal guy, excuse me, even a signal guy is going to see some combat over there. And actually, at the jail, I talked to one of my friends when he was on leave, and he said, yeah, you know, we have shooting and getting shot at, which, you know, adding just that much more validity, you know, to what I'm doing. But so I started to read my Bible, and not from Genesis. I started reading from the New Testament, and repeatedly, what I kept seeing is that Jesus is a pacifist. and all of his teachings pretty much are very anti-war, anti-violence. You know, I realized that if I went, then I would disappoint him, because I don't think that is what his message was. And hey, if I've gotten that message wrong, I can't see that I did, because too many other people have taken his message and used it for their own purposes, and they haven't really do it.
Well, I think one of the things I think that Travis, I would say too, is that he shared with me is that, and I'll also just say for the listeners, this is, Travis is still, he's this is new to him, speaking out. So literally he got thrown in head first into this when he got news of the deployment coming. And as that came out, he started to explore his faith, something that was not necessarily something that was, he was not a super religious dude, but it was something that was always there in his life, always there kind of giving him support and strength. And so as he was facing the question of, can I pull the trigger in Iraq? Can the guys in my unit count on me to protect them? He needed to know, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? And so he turned to the Bible and started reading it with new eyes, because he had a very pressing personal issue right in front of him. And so for him, the conclusion he came to, which is what many other people come to, is that Jesus was nonviolent. And if you want to be a Christian, you have to be nonviolent. The idea of a warrior Christian is completely foreign to what Jesus taught. And so that really set him on a journey. Now, one thing you might want to share a little bit about is, how did you find out about conscientious objection? Did the military teach you about that? Who told you about that?
No, the military didn't try to teach me about that. I met up with some friends close to my coming deployment, and I told them my thoughts about it, because I was still conflicted. But at that point, I realized, I thought that I still had to go. You know what I mean? And I told them how I felt. I told them that I didn't want to kill anyone. I didn't want to put myself in a position to kill anyone. And I told them about that, and they said that it sounds like conscientious objection, but they're not sure. They said, we'll put you in touch with somebody, James, and he can explain it better. So I put a call in. Unknowingly, I leave a voicemail, so that didn't get answered. A couple of days go by, he's busy on other cases, still hadn't heard from him. Deployment time is winding down, and I didn't honestly find out until I think the day or late the night before, like exactly what conscientious objection was. And basically, a conscientious objector is someone who is opposed to war of any kind and who cannot, in good conscience, take another person's life. Now, you can be a selective conscientious objector. You can be selective to what wars you're objecting to for moral and ethical reasons, but for me, it wasn't that for the most part. For me, it was, I cannot do this. I know the kind of person I am, and I cannot, in good conscience, take someone's life. I can't do it. And when I found out what a CO was, I said, that's me. There was no hesitation. That is me. That's how that's how I felt before. That's how I feel strongly now. What can we do about it? I was advised on the consequences of, filing for CO status, the dreaded word AWOL. I was advised on the consequences of that. I was advised on the consequences of what a refusal would bring, and then told to search myself, pretty much, and find out the answer. And didn't take a day. Didn't take a day. I went AWOL. I was gone for 7 days, and I used that time to prepare a statement for my unit, start our case up, and then do my CO packet. The CO packet is like, without the questions filled out, it's like 7 pages, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, without any of the questions actually filled out, it's 7 pages long.
It's the monster.
Yeah.
And they're vague, and the questions I ask are, for the most part, very vague and legally very tricky. They really try to screw people up in that process. And so it's hard for someone like Travis, who really is having, for the first time in his life, to articulate his views, but doing it under the time crunch. Truth is, he should have known about it months before and could have been prepared. Great example, another guy, is he in your same unit? Was Victor in the same unit? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, Victor Augusto. He had, I visited with him as well. I was his attorney. Another soldier in the unit also resisted. But he had several months before his deployment. So we were able to thoroughly explore conscientious objection. And in Victor's case, he decided that, I'm not opposed to all wars, just to certain wars, and I don't want to fight in this one. So he chose not to file for CO status and resisted in that way. The good thing, though, Victor could thoughtfully go through that process without the gun there. In Travis's case, for them not to tell him ever, anyone in the military, to say, if you're in the military and your views on war change, if your conscience change, you have the right to seek a discharge. No one told him that. It took some activists from the Under the Hood GI Coffee House meeting him to say, hey, you sound like a conscientious objector. I mean, it was a horrible place he was in to have to make a decision that quick. But that's what the military puts people in when they don't tell people. And at Travis's trial, we brought several soldiers to the stand who said one guy said, I didn't even know what CO even meant until I heard I was going to be a witness for Travis's trial. None of them had ever been told that they could file for CO status.
So talk a bit about the trial. Was that what happened next? Is basically, you went AWOL, you came back, you announced that you were doing this, and
Well, I went AWOL and I came back, turned myself in 7 days later, turned in my CO packet, my statement to my unit, and said, here I am, do what you will with me. They don't put me in pretrial confinement, which I was very, very excited about, and we start working on the CO packet almost immediately. Actually, they start processing it, and they set up times for you have to be interviewed by a mental health specialist, a chaplain, and then you have to go to a hearing. So when we started realizing that I can say it felt like we were getting messed with. I don't want to incriminate. Felt like we were getting messed with a little bit. The interview with the chaplain, I was told that I had a 1 p.m. appointment with the chaplain at like 1 p.m. And on Fort Hood, if you're late for an appointment, or at least at that point, if you're late for any appointment that they make with the hospital or mental health or chaplain or any appointments, all go directly up to the commanding general of the post, and UCMJ actions pressed. Now, usually it's just like a reprimand, but I didn't want the commander to know my name at that point. So I'm late to the chaplain's appointment. I had to find out about my mental health appointment that my company had made me telephonically. They called my phone, and it's an automated system that they use, and so there was no guarantee that they're even going to call me. So I just happened to get this phone call, and like 2 or 3 days later was my scheduled mental health appointment. I was like, well, thanks guys, I appreciate that. And when I was at the chaplain's appointment, it was brutal, because here's a very personal experience. I thought it was going to be a really in-depth one-on-one conversation about my personal belief structure, and especially with a believer, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that at all. I got maybe, I'd say a half hour. I was supposed to get an hour. I got maybe a half hour, maybe 40 minutes, and in that time, he took he was texting, and at one point he took a phone call. Well, I mean, I can understand. I don't like to rock the boat with lieutenant colonels, so he was, hey, I gotta take this phone call. I was like, oh, hey, sir, you're done. But and that wouldn't bother me, except that on the stand he said he didn't do either of those things. lieutenant colonel chaplain swearing on the Bible and then saying that.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting at trial, the chaplain and the government brought him to the stand, hoping that they're trying to attack Travis's credibility. Well, when the chaplain testified, I got the guy on cross-examination. I was saying, ask him, is there ever a time when your faith might compel you to break the law? And he never would say yes. He kept kind of dodging it and trying to weave here and there. So then I asked him later on, I said, well, what about the people in the civil rights movement in the 60s, that they were people of faith who were breaking the law? And I said, well, did they think they were doing the right thing? And he said, how did he word it? He said, sadly, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then I tried to get him to probe a little bit more, and he basically kept saying that we are to follow civil. He kept talking about civil law and God's law synonymously. The guy had no concept of conscience. And, then in the closure of the closing arguments, I brought up examples from Scripture. Government objected. Judge let it anyway. I argued the Hebrew midwives in Exodus who refused to kill the Hebrew children. I talked about in the New Testament where the apostles said we must obey God rather than men. The Jewish tradition and the Christian faith that came out of the Jewish tradition have this long history of civil disobedience. That's part of the idea of faith, and I think any religious tradition is. It's something that gives you a higher value than just the mere laws of the state. And I wasn't expecting the chaplain to say that Travis's stand was right. I did want him to say that at least it is theoretically possible that someone's faith could compel them to act in a way contrary to the law. And for a chaplain to not even acknowledge that, to me, says he has completely forsaken the ministry. He has decided to be a soldier first and a minister second. And that, to me, is troubling on many levels, primarily, though, as a believer. That to me, for a minister to basically say, I put Caesar first, I put the army first above God, that's blasphemy, frankly.
Yeah, well, let's not hit on chaplain's unprofessionalism too much. We're coming to a point. So after that, there's a hearing, and then it goes to a sort of a review board for CO status, and every board so far has still been denied for my CO status, but that doesn't really matter. I know what I am, and the people that I care about know what I am, and that's pretty much enough for me.
And then from there, after the CO process was going on, we went into trial.
Oh yeah.
In trial, we had several witnesses, people that knew Travis, that could vouch for him to say the kind of person he was. We had one guy from his unit, a friend of his, that didn't necessarily agree with him even, but could say that Travis is a good guy, he's legit, and also was testified that, hey, I've never heard about CO status before. We had a soldier and activist, Michael Kern, testify, telling about the day that him and another friend told Travis about the right to file for CO status. We had another friend testify the same thing. We had a pretty solid case. But our basic argument at trial was that, yes, Travis did fail to go on his mission. We're not going to deny that. Our argument was that we attempted to make, and the judge shot us down, but thankfully he did at least let us make the arguments before telling the jury to disregard them. Our argument was that if Travis was never told he had the right to file for CO status by anyone in the military, then he effectively was denied his due process right to file for CO status. And that denial was so serious that we argued that it should be a defense to the crime of missing movement and disobeying orders and going AWOL. So in a way, it's similar to the Miranda decision. The Miranda decision said that, yes, since the Bill of Rights was enacted, you've always had the right to remain silent. However, in the coercive, scary environment of a police subject interaction when you're taken into custody, the argument is that because it's a very unique situation, because of that, a law enforcement officer should tell the person who's being interviewed, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. And the court said that it was because of that you need that. And I think the military is even more so. Because in the military, from day one, you're told you have no rights, you have no rights, you have no rights. You can't ask questions, you do what we tell you to do. And so how is a soldier going to say, hey, Commander, is there any way, some way in the system that because of my conscience I don't have to obey, that I can be discharged, I can be freed of this? The soldier's not going to ask that question. That's why it's this best kept secret in the Army. In fact, the judge at trial said that if your argument is correct, then there'll be no Army. He said if soldiers have to be told about CO, there would be no Army.
That's sad, isn't it?
So it was an interesting trial. One of the stunning things is we had a juror member fall asleep during trial. We had another juror who was cutting up, joking with the guy next to him.
Just like that.
Yeah, the whole time. And it gave, and also bear in mind, and this is something that Travis will share a little more about too, is that the fact that this is no jury of your peers. Travis had no other enlisted people. There were we could have asked for partially enlisted, but it'd all be higher enlisted. Because we went ahead and agreed to just officers, they weren't low officers. They were all majors and above. So that's a whole other factor, that they're going to have their own set of biases. Basically, what it comes down to, in the military, you do not have the rights as a civilian. Basic constitutional rights, one of them being jury of your peers, you don't have a right to. You have no right to bail if they decide to put you in pretrial confinement. And arguably, as we'll talk about later, you're basically denied your right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment in the military.
Actually, I want to get to that. We only got about 8 minutes left. So fast forward then to actually then serving time at Fort Lewis. What were the conditions like there?
Okay, when I first got there, they had opened up, I think, in July. And they said they weren't supposed to be open yet. They were just already open. And pretty much every problem that we had there, they would say, "Oh well, we're doing some growing pains. We just opened up. We're not supposed to be opened up until, I think at that point they said like January, February of this year." And our argument was, then why are we here? And then basically it's don't talk back. When I was there, I spent 10 days in segregation, which is it's segregation standard when you first come in, but they didn't give me a phone call for a very long time. So people that thought that I was gonna be able to have at least one call to at least my attorney or my mother or somebody, I didn't get that for several days, and so they thought I was incommunicado. But when I finally did get to call my lawyer, there's another NCO. They call them counselors at the facility, but there's a non-commissioned officer sitting there the whole time in the room while I'm talking. And I said, "Hey, this is attorney-client privilege," and he said, "Well, hey, deal with it."
And I asked him, "Hey, I want to talk to the guy." I argued with him. I said, "Look, you're going to deny his right to have a confidential conversation." They said, "Well, we don't have the attorney room set up yet." And that's, most of the brigs have a special room where all calls in and out of the prison generally are monitored, with the exception of the attorney room, which is a soundproofed room with a clear line to the outside that's not being recorded, at least hopefully theoretically. They didn't have that set up. Well, I asked the counselor, "When will it be set up?" He said, I don't know. So from what we know, we know of at least 2 phone calls that were made that were recorded in violation of the law. We couldn't get them to back down on this. So this and the other issue being that they were having female guards watching male inmates use the bathroom and shower.
Let me clarify that a little bit. It's not that I mind that a female watch me in the shower too much. It's the fact that we have guys who are married that are in there that are getting watched by males and females. And are they staring? Are they not staring? Hey, I don't know. I don't look back at them. You know what I mean? But they have and they could. And if not as much for me, it's for those married guys, because what are their wives going to think when they're not doing anything with a guard, but just the fact that they're getting looked at, or that they could be stared at in the shower, and when you're using the bathroom, when they closed down the facility, they put in new cameras, and they gave it a paint job and some other stuff I don't know about, but the new cameras are just big bubble cameras up in the middle of the room, and they got 360 degrees, and they can zoom in, and they can, literally they can read what you have on a piece of paper if they wanted to. Now, do they? I don't know. But what I do know is that it's in direct view of the toilet. Man, I do not feel comfortable doing anything like that in front of a camera.
Yeah. Just because we're about to run out of time, I wanted to mention that the brig did change some of those things. We did get, I had a meeting with the brig commander. While the bathroom situation has not been changed, their argument is that they're in compliance with Army regs. We did get them to change the policy to put in the attorney room. Since then, I've had many phone calls with Travis without any problems. And I would say that for all the problems there, I appreciate the fact that they did meet one of those concerns. There are still other issues there, other problems in the facility, but at least that one issue has gotten better. One thing, too, if we can go ahead and mention, is on Travis's case, that he ended up getting sentenced to 12 months in prison. He chose to plead not guilty, primarily because we weren't able to reach a decent plea deal. So he made a conscious decision to plead not guilty, so that we could make the legal arguments we wanted to and raise them on appeals. So we're now going to be continuing the fight through the appellate process, and hopefully we're hoping to establish some new precedent in the law. The other thing, though, that was a wonderful thing was we did apply for clemency. And clemency is asking the commanding general of the post to knock time off the sentence. And so as a part of that Amnesty International letter drive, we had more than 400 letters that were signed by more than 500 people from over 20 countries in support of Travis. One of the most touching letters a World War II veteran wrote in. Really powerful letter. We submitted that along with issues telling about what happened at Fort Lewis. We submitted that to the commanding general, had a dear friend of ours, Chuck Luther, who carried it into the general. And the general, he read it, and in the end gave us 3 months off, which was a tremendous, tremendous thing. I can't say enough how grateful I am to General Cone for doing that. It was a tremendous thing, and while it didn't completely right the wrong that was done to Travis, I think it went a long ways, and we're very grateful that the system worked in this instance.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not that worried about me, honestly. I'm worried about the other guys that are getting a bum deal with the military court system. And there's like we were talking about earlier, you don't get a jury of your peers. There's no precedent in the military court system. I've seen guys that got 30 days for AWOL, guys that got a year for AWOL. There's no precedent. Do the exact same thing. One of those cases, a guy, his wife, finally told him after 4 deployments, look, if they send you again, it's over. You got me or the Army. What's a grown man to do? You know what I mean? Okay, well, honey, it's you, because you're way more important than the Army. So he goes AWOL for a year, and she gets pregnant with their first child. Well, okay, he doesn't want to be, daddy doesn't want to be a runaway, basically. And they give him a year for it. E6 to E1, bad conduct discharge. Ruined a man's life because he wanted to come back and own up for his mistakes. And you see that again and again.
Just under a couple minutes left. How critical was hearing from supporters and support groups while you were in?
It was amazing, man. I have so many letters, and I'm gonna work so hard to thank everyone personally. And that's what I want to do. Seth Manzel and people at Coffee Strong here, St. Thomas and Under the Hood at Fort Hood, they hugely help get supporters for me, get my story out there. Amnesty International, Iraq Veterans Against the War, Veterans for Peace, they all just did letter writing campaigns. And I can't, if anyone is listening that did write a letter for me or to me, I cannot thank you enough for what you did. But getting a letter almost every day was one of the few things that kept me sane in that place.
Any final thoughts you'd like to leave listeners with?
I think one thing we mention is if there are any people listening who are in trouble with the military, there's a lot of help out there. Call the GI Rights hotline. Really good folks. They provide free confidential help. Their number is 1-877-447-4487. One of the things in Travis's case that's sad is that he found out at the last minute that he could get help. It was at that point, if he had found out 3 months before, it would have been a different story. So if you're having doubts, having questions, call, get help. Things can get better. And Travis, what did you tell me last night about did you have any regrets about what you've done? How do you?
None. I just wish I would have done it sooner. Yeah, just like you said, if you're having doubts or if you're already gone, you know, you don't have to stay gone. You know, it might not be for everybody. I came back, but it might not be for everybody. But you don't have to stay gone. There are people who will do research for you and people that will explain the process to you. And I would definitely investigate, you know, coming back if I was gone. Just look into it and see what would happen if you did.
Well, with that, we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you both for coming and spending time this morning.
Thank you for having us.